We're going to be thinking about the gospel reading this morning. Now, one day, a long time ago, when I was on my way home from Scouts, so if you've got a calculator, you can work out that it was a very long time ago. It was a dark night, and I can still picture the scene. And one of my mates said, "Let's play Knock Down Ginger." Anybody know what Knock Down Ginger is? No? Well, you will when I tell you. It's that little game where you run up to some poor unsuspecting person's front door, knock on the door, and then run away. Anybody else played that? Yeah, one or two hands going up. So I didn't really want to play, to be honest. But my friend was persuasive, and I ended up going along with the game. And of course, inevitably, as the way these things work, we got shouted at and chased by a rather irate householder. Have you ever wondered why Jesus was so cross and so vitriolic towards Peter? It seems completely over the top as a reaction. I mean, "Get away from me, Satan," is quite an outburst. I have to say, the householder that chased me did not say, "Get away from me, Satan." He was probably very cross, but he didn't say that. Get away from me, Satan. Jesus, as we were told, had just spelt out to his followers what the future looked like for him as the Messiah. Now, Peter was upset because Peter had been brought up as a good Jew to believe that the arrival of the Messiah was going to be a glorious and triumphal occasion. The idea of the Messiah swanning in, booting out the Romans, re-establishing the kingdom of Israel, and everything was going to be great. And so when he hears Jesus saying, basically, "I am going to be crucified," he doesn't like it. Not one little bit. And that's why Peter has a word and says, "Look, Jesus, this is rubbish. It's not going to happen." And it's that attitude that Jesus turns to Peter and says, "Get out of my way, Satan." Jesus' outburst, I suspect, is because Peter is actually voicing all the doubts and thoughts and temptations that are actually assailing Jesus. You'll remember at the very last hour when Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane, he prays a prayer. "Lord, take this cup from me." Although he knew his destiny, he did not want to face it. And he is torn between what he knows is the path and not wanting to face it. And Jesus' outburst is so severe because he did not want to die. And the thing is, Jesus knew he had power at his disposal. As the Son of God, he could have altered events. He had that choice. And here he is, fighting the battle against temptation, refighting the battle that he had fought when he spent the 40 days in the wilderness. The temptation to misuse power for his own ends. And that, I think, is why Jesus was so sharp with Peter. It's why he shouted at him, because Peter was voicing all the temptations that were there for Jesus. When I'd been accepted for ordination training, I had to go and tell my boss what was happening. At the time, I was down in Bristol working for a little organisation called Rolls-Royce. And my boss, Mr. McDonald, lived down in the bit of the offices where the carpet was about 2 inches thick and it was all very plush and pleasant. And so off I went down to see Mr. McDonald to tell him that I was leaving. Now, he wasn't best pleased, really. I don't know why, because I was just another rather junior engineer, but he wasn't best pleased. And he took the time and trouble to point out to me that at the time I'd got a wife and a young child. And he pointed out that the church was not going to be nearly as generous in helping me to provide for them as Rolls-Royce would be, and that it was a rather stupid plan to go into the church. It's interesting, at that moment, into my boss's office wandered a gentleman called Stanley. Now, Stanley I had only met once before. Stanley rejoiced in the name of Sir Stanley Hooker, who was by that time sort of nearly retired anyway. So my boss said to Stanley, he said, "Hey Stanley," he said, "this young lad here," he said, "he's going off and joining the church. He's not stopping with us, you know." Well, Stanley weighed in as well and had a bit of a go. But I said, it's not about money. I said, it's just something that I feel God is calling me to do. And eventually they gave up and decided I was a lost cause. But of course, the struggle was that all the things that they were voicing were things that I had thought about and were things that actually worried me. How was I going to provide for my wife and my then one daughter? Because I'd got 2 years of college to face. How was it all going to work out? It was a worry. Sometimes it can be the voice of our closest friends and our family who, for the very, very best of reasons, will try and dissuade us from doing something that we know is God's will. I have to tell you that my mum, when she realised I was forsaking my engineering career and heading off into the church, was not best pleased at all. She thought I was basically being stupid. It's often those closest to us who voice those things. And it's at times like that that we need to be on our guard, but also to have a clear idea of what God's will is. And Jesus knew. He knew clearly what God, his Father, his loving Father, was calling him to do. And it wasn't a great deal as far as Jesus was concerned, but he knew. Deep, deep down in his heart of hearts, he knew. And we all know that there are times when God calls us to do and to take on not the easy path, but the more difficult path, the difficult, costly, consuming option. Jesus says to them all, to the crowds and to his followers, to his disciples, if anyone wants to come with me, he must forget self, take up his cross, and follow me. And that call is to all of us. That call is to work out what that means in our situations, to know what God is calling us to do. So your homework for today is to have a think. Just think back over your lives, whether they're long lives or not so long lives. Have there been moments when you have had that choice? The choice to do what you know God has called you to do, or the choice to head off in another direction. How easy was it to make that choice? Did you make the right choice? How did you respond? And of course, sometimes in life we do not make the right choice. Knock down ginger was not the right choice for me, but I did it. Mercifully, we have a loving and compassionate God who gave himself for us, for our sin, for our wrongdoing, for the times when we have made the wrong choice. He still loves us, despite the choices that we make. But those choices, choosing God's way, choosing God's will, choosing that hard path, that is what God calls us to do. Amen.